Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar on More Than Manuals, Tech Writers as Strategic Collaborators. This is Sheba and I'll be your co-host for tonight. Now I'm delighted to introduce our speaker, Katarzyna Mistarz, Senior Principal Technical Writer at Pegasystems. So Katarzyna brings 7+ years of experience delivering customer-focused documentation and leading innovative cross-team projects. And today, she'll be sharing insights on how intentional cross functional collaboration can transform documentation from a standalone task into a strategic asset that drives clarity, consistency, and user satisfaction. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box and we'll make sure to address them towards the end of the session. With that, I'll hand it over to Katarzyna. The stage is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Shiba, for introducing me. Yes, my name is Katarzyna Mistarz, and as Shiba mentioned, I'm a senior principal technical writer at Pegasystems, and I've been here for over 7 years. And today, I'd like to talk to you about how TechDoc can work with other departments to create more relatable documentation. And honestly, I hope you have your safety helmets and vests with you because I'm taking you to the construction site. And you may ask, what will we be building? And we will be building roads. Because in my opinion, creating documents is slightly similar to to building roads, because both of those things are supposed to get people from A to B. So we will be having some analogies in here. Let's look at the quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. First of all, we need to answer the question, why should we collaborate in the first place? What are the benefits of such projects? Then we will talk a little bit about how to prepare for such collaboration. We will talk about the project itself, how to evaluate it, and finally, we'll talk about things that may happen in the meantime and how to remediate them. And last but not least, the icing on the cake, I will tell you about my real life collaboration with other departments. Okay, so let's jump in. So you want to build this road from A to B. It's going to be a huge investment, most probably. It's going to involve some people, definitely a lot of time. So you need to have a list of benefits that this project is going to bring. And in my opinion, everyone involved really gets something out of this project. So let's start with users, with the most important persona, people we wrote for. So what do they get? First of all, they get documentation that they can relate to. Because I forgot to mention that I will be focusing on collaborating with two departments. One of them will be engineering and one of them will be user-facing roles. In my case, this is consulting. And also the things that we're going to talk about, I believe, concern both standalone documents like single tasks or concepts, but also larger documentation projects that gather a set of documents. And I'm going to focus more on the latter. So going back to the benefits, let's start with users. What do they get? First of all, they get the documents that they can relate to. Because when you work with the user-facing roles, you have a great opportunity to ask questions about how people actually use the product. In our case, in my company, is the platform to build your own applications, and then those applications are used by end users. Our documents are used mostly by the developers or consultants. So when you work with those user-facing roles, they know the processes within other companies that buy our product. They know how people use the applications, what are their objectives to reach. So when somebody goes through a document that they can relate to, is from a similar area and describes similar processes, it may be way easier for them to understand what the feature actually is about. And here I need to add a disclaimer that when I work with consulting, we talk about processes and examples. We always keep it very general. We make sure that no kind of sensitive data from any company is reflected in the documentation, so it's always safe. And then when people know how to use the product, relying on the docs, they have better experience while using the product because they start a work day, they are facing some kind of a task that they need to complete, and it's easier for them if they can simply follow some steps, they understand what it is about, they want to work with this product, they don't want to change it. And this kind of experience gives them more independence and less frustration because they can simply complete their work within given time frame and they can move to the next task. And in here, I believe it can also have a quantitative measure, like fewer tickets to the support because people can do more on their own. Okay, now let's move to the engineering part. Sometimes it may feel like a huge investment for them because they're going to spend more time during some meetings with TechDoc. They will need to review some documents, go through some calls. So what's in it for them? First of all, they get well-documented features. They can make sure that any technical details that need to be included in the docs are actually there. Then also TechDoc can work like an early testers. Like for us, when we want to prepare docs, we typically need to go through the feature in the environment, click it through, and then if we notice anything that's out of order, like any bugs or some things that could be slightly tweaked to enhance the experience for users, we can always communicate that early in the process so it can be mended, fixed before the actual release. And with TechDoc working as an interim between the engineering and user-facing part, then the engineering part also gets an additional channel of collecting feedback and information on how people use the product, what they actually need in the product, what should be changed. Of course, there are other channels to do it as well, but it's always additional opportunity to sit at the table and discuss how the product should work to deliver best experience for the users. Then we move to TechDoc, and for us, working both with engineering and let's say consulting is a great opportunity to gather direct input and direct feedback. Because when we prepare docs, then of course we need to have everything explained to make sure that things that we write are correct and include all the necessary information. So there's no other way than directly working with people who build the product. But then we also need to know the side of the user and the user's needs and the user's perspective, and we can get that knowledge from user-facing roles like consulting. And I believe that putting those two things together, the technical knowledge and the user's needs, can result in really great and useful documentation. Then, when we build those roles, we may have some potholes on the way, some gaps, let's say, in our docs. And with working with more people, it's easier with people from consulting and engineering, it's easier to identify those gaps and remediate them. And here I've got a really great example from my personal experience. Like this year in January, I guess, or it was in December last year, me and one of my colleagues had an opportunity to take part in an internal consulting training that was organized because Pega was introducing a new design application system. And during that training, uh, we could see what kind of questions people were asking, concerns that they had, things that needed to be explained in more details in the documents. And it gave us great feedback, a lot of insights, a lot of information about things that require more detailed documentation. This training was, I believe, 3 days long. And during those 3 days, we gathered way more feedback than we would have been able to get through any survey, any kind of emails, calls, and being there was really profitable for us. And we could do it because our ties with consulting were already quite strong and maintained. And also what we get is better understanding of the product itself, how things in the product work, and also what users need. So it's easier for us to create documents that are really useful and relatable for our users. And then we move to the final piece of this puzzle, which is user-facing team. In my case, it's consulting. And when I was talking to people about things that they benefit from this project, I heard that they can use TechDoc as single source of truth, because sometimes some of the processes needed unification, or they needed to have some best practices written down. And when they have some links in TechDoc, it's easier for them to make it official, to create official documentation that they can use during their own workshops, but also with clients to make sure that all the processes are unified. Also, sometimes they have their own potholes, let's say, and they see that some processes or tasks should be documented, they're not. It's a kind of a tribal knowledge that exists in some forum, and having it put in an official documentation also makes the work easier. And again, they share one of the benefits with the engineering team, because again, with TechDoc in the middle, they've got an additional channel to communicate with engineers and to somehow influence how the product should be developed to meet actual users' needs. Okay, so we know why. Then what do we do next? Of course, we need to have a plan. When we start building a road, we don't want all that heavy machinery roaming around, spreading havoc. We need to know what we're doing and the direction in which we're going. And in my opinion, first thing that we need to know is to know our destination. We want to build a road from A to B. We need to know where the road is going to lead us. And I'm pretty sure that you've already seen some kind of, sorry, it's not for this point. You need to know where the road is going to lead us. And here it's both important from the consulting and engineering perspective to establish what is the goal of creating, of performing a specific task. And also, when, especially with larger projects, you want to know the direction in which you're going to make sure that you're not wasting anyone's time, that you have meetings, you have calls, but there's always a kind of an outcome. Then the next thing, you need to know your audience. You need to know whether you write for beginners, let's say, people who only start working with your product and have little knowledge and maybe don't need that much of technical detail, or maybe you write for very advanced developers who need to perform very advanced actions and they need to know a lot of technicalities about things that they're going to do, or maybe you write for kind of a product owner who only wants to get the overview of some features to decide whether they want to implement them or not. So again, discuss with your SMEs from consulting and engineering about people who you are going to write for, so you can adjust the output to the user's needs. And then you need to plan this efficient route from A to B. If you can get somewhere within an hour, you don't want to spend 3 hours on the road, right? Or I'm sure you've seen some kind of funny videos of people following GPS and ending up in the middle of the lake or in the middle of the field. So this is not something that we want for our users. We want to make sure that they can reach their goals in the most efficient way. So you don't want to overstimulate them with too much detail, but you also want to make sure that they've got all the necessary dots to connect to reach their goal. And finally, you need to find your team, people you're going to work with, and you need to agree on a schedule. And from my experience, it's definitely better to find one or two people at that point to work with, because organizing a group or 6 or 7 experts may be very time consuming, and trying to put all of those people in one room for a call to go through some ideas or review some documents may be very difficult, and constant rescheduling and canceling will definitely slow your project down. And also you need to think about the cadence on which you're going to meet or communicate, like weekly or bi-weekly, whatever works for you, to make sure that the project can be finished in a timely manner. Okay, so you've got your team, you've got your plan, and then you can start working. So first of all, what I believe is very important is sticking to the schedule. If you agreed for 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, then try to be accountable, and you can also count or you can expect other people's accountability. And also make sure that before each meeting, there is something to discuss or something to show. Because if you meet just to say that there is no update, you may discourage people very quickly. And then the project may simply wind up without reaching its destination. And at that point, make sure that there are no detours or shortcuts, which means that you ensure that everything that needs to be included in the documents, especially in those larger documentation sets, is there. And what really helps me here personally is to create a kind of a draft table of content at the very beginning. It can be very high level, but first, that's what I typically create before the first or second meeting with the stakeholders. And then we together go through the subjects that need to be included in the documentation, which is like kind of a map or guidance for us. Also, we need to be flexible and open for reevaluation. It may turn out in the process that meeting every week is too much and you don't need that many meetings. In that case, it's better to change the cadence to make sure that there's actually something to discuss during every meeting. And also, I had a very similar experience, like with one of my projects. It turned out that my SME's capacity was very limited, and it was very difficult to get regular reviews. And we had to reevaluate the process a couple of times to finally deliver it. And then again, try to stick to regular reviews, both of the documents and both of the process. I think it's important, especially with those larger documentation sets, and it's very difficult to expect people to review 15 or 18 documents at once. So I believe that in here, kind of a Scrum methodology will be easier to meet on regular basis and review the docs on the regular basis. And then when the project is finished, you can always provide the kind of an overall review. Okay. And then you can say that the project is finally over, right? You created all the docs, you review it, and what is next? You need to inspect what you built to make sure that everything is safe, everything works as it's supposed to. So what do I do in that situation? First of all, I gather as much feedback as possible. And while I've been working on the project with one or two people, here I involved more people, actually as many as I can. But again, like tip from my experience is that first of all, you need to find a channel of communication that works both for you and the people that you want to review your docs. For some people, it will be a call scheduled in the calendar. It's easier for them than to book some time. For some others, it will be sending an email with the documents and way to comment them. So discuss it with people that you want to work with, and then gather feedback. And again, what I do is to reaching out to each person individually, because I've noticed that if you send one email to 5, 6, 7 people, then not everyone may respond, waiting for someone else to respond. So it's better to reach out to people individually. Then it's time to evaluate what you've done. You need to look at your work holistically, see if it ticks all the boxes, and ask yourself, is it what we were expecting to achieve? Should we add something in here? And then what I do, and what I also advise you to do, is to evaluate the process. Like, did you enjoy the process whatsoever? Because if the process works well, then it's more probable that you're going to cooperate with those people in the future as well. And my favorite part in here is making your work visible, announcing it any way you like. So you can post it on LinkedIn, you can talk about it during some kind of all hands meetings within your organization, you can send emails, but it's definitely been a huge investment to you. It costs a lot of time, a lot of involvement. So yes, make it visible and then celebrate. You build your road, you help people get from A to B, so you deserve some kind of a celebration for it. But sometimes things can go wrong, And in my experience, there are two major threats on the way. The first one is when the schedule gets a little bit too flexible. And if you've worked with any kind of building, construction, rebuilding, decorating, redecorating, you know it's not going to go according to the schedule. You know some deadlines are going to be missed. You know some people are not going to deliver. And it's like gravity. There's no point in defying it. It's simply how it is. I don't know why, but it's how it works. And things like that can also happen with your project. And what I would do in such a situation, in such situations, and what I typically do, first of all, I revisit the schedule. As I said, that maybe right now we're meeting too often, or maybe not often enough. Maybe having more of those points to contact would be better for us, and maybe then we wouldn't miss that many opportunities to synchronize on our work. Then sometimes it may be also necessary to reprioritize your work. Like typically, I believe that it may be difficult to have enough resources to focus on one project only. So maybe it's worth talking to your manager that some other work shouldn't be prioritized right now, or maybe the project itself should be put aside. But if yes, then make sure that you get back to it as soon as possible. And ideally, in a perfect world, you would have one person designated to work with you for each project. And here, what I find very useful, let's say, and things that I'm thankful for is supporting management. Because if a manager delegates a person to work on the project, whether it's a tech doc person or a person from engineering or consulting side, they need to be aware of the fact that it is going to take time and it should be reflected in their tasks. I believe then it's way easier to carve out some time for regular reviews and for preparation in between of those reviews. And yeah, sometimes you need to be open for some flexibility, and life happens. Like during the first of that project that I took part on, when we were reaching the end, but it still wasn't finalized, it turned out that person working with me was about to go on a yearly leave of absence for a sabbatical leave. So I had to reprioritize my work, and we had to close it sooner than we expected because it was important for me to finish the work with this person. We were towards the end, and introducing somebody new and getting them up to speed with the entire project would be really time consuming. So you need to be prepared for that kind of emergencies as well. Another thing that happened to me is the scope of the project becoming slightly blurry. So you start to take too many detours, let's say. You want to include too much. And then what I do is to revisit the scope. I get back to my initial draft. I see how it works with the direction in which we're going to, and I discuss it with my SMEs. But another thing that might be very useful in here is to gather more feedback or seek advice from a person who's not directly involved with the project. And then that kind of a fresh perspective may help you a lot to get back on track, or maybe to change the track if that is justified. And finally, I would like to tell you about the projects that I've been working on. I will focus on the consulting side in here. And around 2 years ago, my manager approached me with a question whether I had some capacity to take part in a new project. And it happened that I did have some capacity for that. And the project was to create a documentation journey. This is how we call it at Pega, and you can see it on the screen. And the documentation journey is a set of documents that are grouped in a logical way and that lead users from beginning to the end through a comprehensive one use case. So read it kind of like a book. It's like a journey, and the project itself was my personal journey as well, because as part of this project, I had a great pleasure of going to the Netherlands to take part in the consulting workshop at the client side, and it was a marvelous opportunity for me to see how people actually work with our product, what kind of questions they have, what things need to be clarified in the docs, and how they see the process of creating applications, because this is the product that we offer. So it's like one of a kind experience, and I believe I wouldn't have been able to get that much information, that kind of experience through any calls, any meetings, simply with consulting people. Being there, taking part in it, was really very useful for my work, and it also affected how I perceive the product and documentation right now. I think we can put it in a more holistic direction. And in that case, finishing this documentation journey took me around 6 months, I believe. It's quite a lot, but still, this was the case where my product owner's capacity was very limited. We had to find some ways to finish that, but still, it was a wonderful experience. And I believe if it hadn't been for those ties with consulting, I wouldn't be, let's say, as an experienced writer as I am right now. So that would be all from me. Thank you very much for listening and for joining today.
Yeah, thank you, Katarzyna. The session was quite insightful, and I'm sure the audience will agree with me. Thank you, Katarzyna, and that's a
Thank
wrap
you.
for today's session. A huge thanks to Katarzyna for walking us through the topic. I hope the insights shared tonight gave everyone a clearer understanding of how structured cross functional collaboration can transform your documentation efforts from isolated tasks to impactful, team driven outcomes. To everyone who tuned in, thank you for taking the time to be here. If you have more questions or want to learn more about Document 360, then feel free to reach out to us. We'll be back soon with another session soon. Until then, see you next time. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all. Bye.